Shamber, how are you doing?
I am holding up. How about you, David?
I'm doing good. Thanks for joining the podcast once again.
Yeah, it's always super fun. I feel like just us being previous foster kids, like we have a lot in common, but also we always cut it up.
We
So
we definitely connect. We have a good connection, and ever since the first episode,
yeah,
it's kind of crazy to think that the things that you are currently going through have been going on since then.
before that, because like we would have met when I was in the fitness industry, which that was the beginning of actually no. Yeah, we would have met right around when it started. Yeah.
That's
Two
wild.
and a half years ago. It's
And
been a long, long 2.5 years.
I could imagine. For I guess the audience who is listening and might not know the history and the things that are currently going on, can you please walk us through that?
Whew, it's a long story. Where do I begin?
We have time. I just want to
Um,
note that we have 18 people watching this right
all
now.
right. Well, I honor all 18 of you for being here. And really, so many of you have been supportive and resharing what's happening. And I feel really humble. And I'm going to really try to make it through this podcast, David, without crying. I cannot guarantee because this is a very emotional story what we're going to unpack today. But from the beginning, basically, I'm one of 18 kids and grew up in just a super great home. A beautiful, beautiful home. My dad was an engineer and architect, so he designed like all of it. It looks like Bravo's, the
Wow.
Italian restaurant. It's gorgeous. Beautiful home. We had great opportunities. Oh my word, we traveled around the United States. I've gotten to meet celebrities because of my parents. Great home, right? And fast forward to the summer of 2021, so 2.5 years ago. And I get a call. I was out and about. I get a call about 10 p.m. You need to get to the house right now. CPS is at your parents' house. And so I'm like in shock. And there was a rumor that CPS had been called. It's been called a few times through the years because let's just be honest, having 18 kids looks kind of quirky. Let's just be, I'll admit that, right? We could look quirky. So whatever. But this was like legit. We had never had CPS actually show up, especially at like 9, 10 p.m. That's kind of weird, right? So I drive to my parents. This was with my ex. Oh my word. The night is foggy, but if I remember correctly, there's numerous police cars. There's CPS and DHS workers there. I think there's an investigator. And when I get there, they had already been there for a time. So by the time I get there, I see my younger siblings, who I have 5 younger than 18. They're in a group with a police officer. And then my parents are like told to remain, like, do not move. And I'm like, what's going on? And my parents look calm, but it's just shock, right? And I'm seeing police come in and out of the house, and they were, I mean, raiding it, right? They were moving items, and I yeah, that's kind of what began this nightmare.
What was the reason for them being there?
So there was a person who had called in for something that I can say confidently as a witness that was falsified, calls in and said that my parents were abusive and paired up with one of my siblings. And
What do you mean a witness that was falsified?
Okay. So they said that they experienced something from my parents and then the Browns. So the Browns are my in-laws. The Browns were our next door neighbor. We did everything together from church vacations, whatever. They said that they were physically grabbed. Did not happen. There's numerous witnesses that were present. And then that they were also saying that they were going to report and say that my parents were psychologically abusing us. Now, at this time, the Browns weren't really wrapped up in this. The Browns got wrapped up because we're super close to them. We did everything with them. But also with the Browns, we actually were helping with one of their younger daughters. She is just lovely, but she had experienced some trauma prior to her adoption. And so we were helping them out. So she'd often stay with my family. And so, as you've probably seen in the news and articles, they're saying that the Browns, Joel and Tammy Brown, teamed up with Tamal and Jerry Flore, my parents, to abuse all of us kids because my parents adopted 16 of us. So there's 18, 2 biological, 16 adopted. And then the Browns, there's 11 of them. I think it's 8 of which that are adopted. That number might be incorrect, but that's pretty close. And so, yeah.
Why would they say that it's a giant scheme that you guys, like your families colluded together to adopt these children,
Scheme
to just
together.
abuse them and collect money?
Yeah. So basically, I want to make sure we're looking at comments here too. Hey, Ashley. So basically, Joel Brown was a CPS worker, I think since early 2000s. And therefore, he has the professional knowledge on how to raise kids, right? And so the assumption is that he, with all of his knowledge, was allowing for abuse to take place while with this knowledge. So he's able to like hide it. And then also they said that
What was his role at DHS? Can you say?
I'm not entirely sure. I just know it was CPS.
Okay.
I think it's varied through the years. I mean, since this started, he lost his job, which is catastrophic, right? Raising all those kids and then you lose your job because this starts. And yeah, that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's been a huge nightmare. What we've had to undergo with this case starting is just horrific. Especially as a kid, like me and my other siblings have discussed, it's crazy to see the events unfold. But like, it's like conflicting because we're like, what in the world? Like we hear that some of the accusations and it's like, our parents were outstanding. I mean, we had the best education. When we were pulled out of public school, we had private tutors. Like if I'm like, hey mom, I'm struggling with math, we're going to give you a private tutor.
How old were you when you were pulled out of school? What grade?
Well, so we varied. So I was adopted at 7. So I was like preschool, whatever before then. We did some homeschooling for a few years. And then I was public school, middle school. And then I did private school for my high school years.
Oh, okay.
So still with like professional teachers or whatever. And yeah, the just best education, the best clothes, the best food. People would always joke they'd come over to the Flore's house and it's like it's never the same meal twice. Like we're always making like good food. And so these accusations, it's really like I want to say laughable, but it's not laughable. But that's how crazy some of these accusations have been that my parents, if you've kept up with like the news and the articles, is that my parents basically kept us locked up in a house that we could never leave. And they used homeschooling as a guise to abuse us, both physically and emotionally and psychologically. I think that's the accusation.
What were the accusations that made them claim those things?
I don't know. I don't actually know. I know I think it's a collaboration of things, but it's also hard to whittle through what is true and what's been falsified. Though I do know there's a lot that's been falsified.
What kind of information has been falsified?
I'm gonna be really cautious because I want to make sure. For example, if you look at the report, you will see there's alleged interviews that they had with me or a few of my other siblings where it's pages long. And myself personally, I had a 60-second interview with a CPS worker. That's the only bit of contact I have had with anyone in 2.5 years. Now, you'll know if you watch the press conference on Monday that the Attorney General said that this is being thoroughly investigated, that they've interviewed the kids. That's false.
Nobody's
Because
been interviewed?
there are a portion of us Flores that have been interviewed, but the ones that are more vocal and are firmly putting our foot down, go, these are accusations, are false. We haven't been contacted. I haven't been contacted by a sheriff, by an investigator, by the Attorney General, by a CPS worker since the initial day the kids were removed. And that initial day the kids were removed, I was asked 2 questions. But somehow in what the interview says I said, there's so much more dialogue that didn't take place. It was a 60-second conversation.
What were the questions?
I can't answer that.
Okay.
But I think why me and my siblings are getting a little passionate is that, well, let me paint the scenario. Our parents are being charged for things that they allegedly did to us, the victims. Okay. And there's stories circulating about what happened to us victims. And yet, us victims, a large portion of us have never been interviewed. Or if we have, we didn't even really discuss that.
How many have been interviewed?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know the exact number on that.
I think I seen something that they said that they've interviewed some, but like out of
so
all
it's
the
about
children,
half of us, Flores. But even of some of the kids that they have interviewed, some of them have said they're coaxing me to say things, or I didn't say that, or I don't want to even do this. I love my mom and dad. I know, and this is on record. You could find this if you went to the police station. Is that one of my sisters actually ran away from her foster home, showed up at my parents' house, and they couldn't have contact with her because she's of the state, right? And so they're like, you have to stay outside. We just called the police, right? But she's there because she's yelling, this isn't true. I love you. They're getting me to say things, right? And yet this is one of the alleged victims that they have said, she hates her parents and they caused so much trauma and damage. And yet, if that was the case, why is she running away from her foster parent, who is now supposed to be a safe place, and going back to Jerry and Tamal Flore, right? That doesn't make sense. And that she's not the only one. There's numerous ones that have been interviewed that now, if you were to talk with them, they'd be like, yeah, I didn't say all that.
What do you think the motivation is behind all of this?
I feel like there's a lot. So again, if you've been keeping up with the news, something that they've been taglining in with the case the past couple of days is that all of this happened because we were homeschooled. Okay. And they're trying to push, like, we need more reform to monitor those who are homeschooling. We need to monitor people who have adopted. We just need to monitor more. Right. And I'm all about creating safe spaces for children. That's part of like my motto and why I'm studying trauma right now, is creating a safe place for people.
You're getting your master's.
I am getting my master's. Yes. But I'm all about that. But when you use a situation like this and you're falsifying details to use it towards your own agenda, that's just disgusting. So what they're saying in the articles, and they're tying it back to homeschooling, is all of this abuse, alleged abuse, is happening because they were homeschooled. The attorney general said that, and I commented on her post. I just said this is false, because there's a portion of us Flores and Browns that were barely even homeschooled, that went almost all of their years, maybe up until the last 1 or 2 years of high school, they were entirely public schooled. So to make that disgusting accusation that this all happened because they were all homeschooled is inaccurate. And I would just, I would say, and I really encourage, and I have been encouraging people, and as I've talked to reporters, is I would like to see more eyes on this investigation. I would like some more accountability. I would like, to say in a statement, even just like that this abuse happened because they were homeschooled. That's a pretty bold statement without double checking your facts. And so, yeah, I would like to see more eyes. And
you guys were also pretty heavily involved at church too, right?
Oh, more than that. Yes, church. But we grew up doing sports. We grew up doing taekwondo. We did theater. We did homeschool performing arts, which is, or not all of us, but a portion of us did. Homeschool performing arts was basically, we would go once a week. We'd be there all day. And then show week, we're there all day, all week, right? And don't you think through the years of being there so frequently that some director, some teacher, some peer would be like, this is weird, right? Because what the signs of abuse are normally pretty obvious. Normally it's their clothes are disheveled. They're coming, maybe there's visible bruises. Maybe they haven't showered in a couple of days. They maybe have lice. Maybe they're very introverted and they can't formulate sentences. Maybe they're not safe around someone of a particular gender. There's obvious signs of abuse. And I would just like, if there was truly abuse going on with that many kids spread all out in different activities, someone would have reported it. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah.
So, something else, and I'm going to keep referencing the press conference, I think, throughout this conversation, because that's been the buzzing trend of Lansing, because that was a really big thing. The Attorney General mentioned that they reopened this case to further investigate it. And that originally, I think she said, and I could be wrong in this number, but I'm pretty sure she said they only had about 6 people on staff that were surrounding this case versus like another, I don't know if it was a district or a branch, had like 60 some people, right?
Yeah.
I felt like of her own admission, she admitted, we don't have enough people on this investigation. And I would agree with that. Let's bring in, whether that's maybe people from a different district, that's some state representatives and senators, that's outside investigators. I don't know what it takes, but I felt like of her own admission, she admitted, we don't have enough eyes on this. Well, she said they had to reopen it. Yeah, if you're going to open it and you're going to truly investigate it, then investigate it well. And I'd like to be contacted for an interview along with a few of my other siblings.
What was the reason for them dropping the charges back in April, correct? It was April.
Yeah. I can't entirely speak to that matter. I know that my parents had an enormous amount of evidence. They have amazing attorneys helping both the Flores and the Browns. And yeah, a lot of evidence.
One thing that the Attorney General, I think I read in an article, she had said was they were originally charged, and then some of those charges didn't stick, but they found new charges that they were able to bring up on them.
Allegedly, yeah.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
What charges were those?
Ooh, I don't have those memorized. Some of them I felt like they were kind of the same thing as the original charges. They just said it a different way.
They did say that.
Yeah. And I think the Attorney General noted this in the press conference, that basically that they were still, like, it was never over, which that's not what you see when you go back to April of this year. The case was clearly dismissed, but they're making it seem like, oh no, we just put it on pause. It was never dismissed. Yes, it was. It was dismissed. And I believe, and I can't speak a lot to this matter because you're going to see in the next few days, but basically, they knew that my parents were gathering information, and are trying to go after them. And I think there was some fear there. And that's about all I can say right now. But we'll see in some further days, definitely.
So they caught some wind of what was going on.
I believe so.
And they reopened the case. The general.
That's my
attorney.
theory. That's my theory.
So this came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Wow. So what was your thoughts? How did you guys find out
that this was reopened?
Yes.
I was at home doing homework because I'm a student, and I think my mom sent the press conference, and I was in shock, right? I just total shock when, oh, that's right. I was doing work in Grand Rapids. I live in Holland now, and I'm driving back home and I'm watching the press conference. And yeah, I just started sobbing, because anyone that knows the Flores or the Browns know that they were so committed and invested in their community. I can't even tell you how many people they have affected in this community, whether that's financially. There's been countless times I can remember the past. I've been in the home since 2005, so almost 20 years that I've been in the home, that I've seen my parents give financially. They've given their time. They'll drop what they're doing. Like if someone calls, hey, I need help with this. I need you to help me with this demolition on my house. Okay, they just drop their stuff and they go help them. Well, that could be like community service. Like we've done like soup kitchens. We've done like ring the bell at Christmas. Oh my goodness. I've just seen my parents be so selfless. And so, hearing these charges again, it's like, are you for real? Like it's laughable, honestly. And then again, if making these statements that they have really boldly without really double checking their facts. I say it's lazy investigation, but also it points to the underlying fact that there is definitely much more that meets the eye. It's so much more than this case. I think they're using this case to advance propaganda. I really do.
Propaganda against homeschooling.
Or agenda. Yeah, both. Homeschooling, I feel like there's even a little bit biasness towards religion. And
because it's typically religious people that homeschool their children, right?
That's not entirely true, because when COVID kicked up, a lot of people pulled their kids out, and also the rise in shootings. You know how many people I run into that have pulled their kids out because it's statistically much safer to homeschool your kids than put them in school.
Yeah.
I know yesterday there was an interview with one of the state reps, and then I think it's a head like homeschooling association in Michigan. So they both were interviewed yesterday on was it CBS News, I believe, and they were discussing how statistics show that the rise of like bullying and being assaulted with a weapon in schools it's inclined drastically. Like it's really sad, like how now kids go to school and they're like, oh, I hope there's not a shooter that shows up today, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's sad when my kids are in school, and my daughter's 8, my son is 6, and when they come home and tell me that they're doing school shooter drills, it's like, oh my gosh, like, could you imagine? Like,
is this happening?
I never did that in school. I never had to worry about that. We did tornado drills.
Yeah, tornado drills. You hide under Jess. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real fear, and it's a tremendous fear as a parent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, pulling your kids out and homeschooling is definitely a viable thing when it comes to that.
Also, statistics show that, and I'm not saying all, I want to say generally, or statistics show that homeschoolers are very intelligent and they make it very far in life. I know numerous homeschoolers that have ended up in Ivy League schools. I know one right now who is a professor at an Ivy League school. He was homeschooled. So, and I don't want to speak for all their homeschool, because I can definitely attest, and we've heard, horror stories that people who have said they're homeschooling their kids and they're not, right? And abuse does take place. Yep. And so I don't want to discredit that, like, every person that homeschools their kids, like, leave them alone. No, I agree that, in that regard, maybe there should be reform, because there are people that can take advantage of the system 100%. But in this case, again, it goes back to my initial statement of this is a lazy investigation. And we have overwhelming evidence that this is not the case of taking advantage of the system.
What do you think is going to happen? Your adopted parents had to turn themselves in. They have to turn themselves in by tomorrow, correct?
So they had their hearing yesterday. So they're out on bond. And now it's just the waiting game and the pulling together continually of our evidence and resources. It's the waiting game for situations like this. You don't know when the next court date is until a certain time. Like, it's working together right now. My goal would be to get the word out, which is, I'm so glad to even have this opportunity with you. Me, along with numerous Flore kids and Brown kids, we've been silent for 2.5 years. Why? Because I feel like in a lot of ways,
yeah, you've been on the podcast twice since then, with it, like,
and I haven't told
2 years, and you've never mentioned it once.
Because we felt like we had a muzzle over our mouths. It's like our voices were taken away, and in some ways, it's re-triggering of the trauma we went through pre-adoption. Think about it. You, once a foster kid, you felt like you didn't have a voice, right? It's like whatever happened. Like, they're not listening to me, right? You feel that as a foster kid, and then you get adopted and you're in a safe place, right? But then CPS comes along and removes your kids, starts taking you in. Then it's like, what in the world? What is this weird feeling? Oh, I feel re-victimized. And that's what a lot of us are feeling. We have no voice. We're being re-victimized through this. And it's like, no, I shouldn't feel like this. I'm 26 tomorrow.
Happy early
birthday. Thank you. Going to be 26 years old, I shouldn't feel like a child that I have no voice. No. And so this time around, now that they're coming again and we've been silent, it's almost like we've had a muzzle over our mouth. No more. We're not being muzzled. We're going to fight. We're going to stand strong. I've been reaching out along with dozens of other people. We've been reaching out to state reps, senators, court advocates. We are social media platforms, influencers, any person we can get this into. We're trying to share this story. We're trying to get, again, more eyes on the situation. Am I saying every person wrapped up in the situation is bad? Absolutely not. I'm sure there's wonderful people in the law enforcement that have their eyes on this case, but there have been a few select people that are proving themselves maybe not trustworthy, maybe not doing their job adequately. Again, going back to, this is lazy investigation, and I'd like to see this investigated in a more appropriate manner.
Have you guys had any pushback as far as when you reach out to other news organizations or anybody with them wanting to cover the story?
No, because this is the thing. I think because it's been 2.5 years of silence, they were under the impression, the few reporters I've spoken to, they've been under the impression, because of what the Attorney General says or the Clinton County authorities have said, that all of us are just so traumatized and we've now been rescued, or, however the articles have painted it. And so when I have talked with reporters along with a few of my other siblings, they're baffled because the narrative has been, oh my word, Jerry and Tamal Flore and Joel and Tammy Brown were so abusive. Meanwhile, they're, actually, yeah, I can firmly say all the Brown kids are advocates of their parents. And about half of us Flore kids are speaking out for my parents. That's a lot of people.
How many kids would be speaking out, would you say, for you guys?
I can't give an exact number. It's really hard because some of my siblings are in the foster care system and I don't have any contact with them.
So what happened? There was kids that are underage. They were
Correct.
removed from the home.
Yes. So 5 of my siblings, and
they were adopted?
No, they're in the foster care system. They've been in the foster care system for 2.5 years.
How long have they been placed in? Oh, they've been placed in that home for 2.5 years.
I think I don't keep track of them, and I haven't had contact with them in a while, but to my knowledge, normally when you end up in the foster care system, you bounce from home to home. So yeah, it's sad. So for those 5 minors, according to the charges that were just brought out as of yesterday, when my parents read the charges in their hearing, they mentioned the 5 minors, but again, at this point, it's like what's true and what's false. It's almost like you don't even know, and so it's now the journey of dissecting and really looking into and pulling from our resources. I know we're strongly leaning into the ones that are like, we are advocates of mom and dad, to be like, okay, cool, let's go through the narrative. Wait a second, you didn't say that? Well, that's in the report, right? And just taking notes. But then also just getting loud.
What is the purpose of lying? And because if they said that, well, this child said this, what is the reason for them to lie and say that they said that when they didn't?
So one can never truly know. I have a couple theories. My first theory is that this pushes the agenda of just more like enforced
restrictions
on homeschooling.
Yeah.
On religious families. I think there was even something in one of the reports that said there was the psychological abuse because our parents made us go to church. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure I remember hearing this about a year ago. Which my parents, I will say right now, my parents didn't make us do. I remember.
You still practice religion.
I love Jesus. Yes. No, there was no forcing. And I remember even when we were teens, or you can kind of understand, right? Because as a kid, you don't really understand. But as a teen, my parents are like, you have to make that choice. Like, we can't make you love Jesus, right? Like, if a parent's like, you have, like, you must, like, you can't eat till you love Jesus, like that's abusive, right? I understand. But my parents are always like, this is a choice you have to make. Like, we can't make it for you. Whatever. Okay, cool. And so yeah, today I'm a professing Christian. Not all my siblings are, and whatever. I still love them. My parents still love them. We get along. It's great. But so that's theory number 1. Theory number 2. Some of you might remember back in 2018, there was a lawsuit between St. Vincent and the ACLU. I don't know if this rings a bell, but basically the ACLU made an accusation, or it wasn't an accusation. They sued St. Vincent because St. Vincent does not finalize adoptions with LGBTQ community. Okay. They believe that it should be a man and woman. Okay. And they're a Christian-based organization. Like, I think that's their right. And there's DHS down the road. Cool. Whatever. But what ended up happening was the ACLU did a setup. It wasn't even a real couple trying to adopt. The ACLU set up that couple, and they ended up admitting that. So St. Vincent won that lawsuit. Now, when you look at that lawsuit, you go back, I was actually the face for that case. They brought me in on that case because I was adopted through St. Vincent, and I used to be a foster care advocate with St. Vincent. So they asked me to come in. I did. And who also was backing, so I was backing up with St. Vincent, okay? And then who was the person backing up with ACLU? None other but the Attorney General, Dana Nessel.
Whoa.
Yes. So I think analyzing that's a huge factor. And I don't know if a lot of people have made that correlation, but it's something that makes you think she clearly knows who we are, right? And I
So
want
it's
to
a personal
could be.
personal
I don't want to make any
assumptions,
right? I don't know the Attorney General personally, and I have nothing to say other than I hope she's a great Attorney General. I mean, she made it to Attorney General. She's got to have a great character to some degree, right? And great knowledge, right? But it makes you wonder, like, interesting. And that was a 3-4 year lawsuit. So that was a long, tedious lawsuit. And so it does make you wonder. Again, I'm not saying anything, but it makes you wonder.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's. I mean, I read in the article, one of the articles, your family's attorney said he feels like it's a witch hunt.
It does. And also, why would you, if the Browns and Flores were truly abusive, why would you have to falsify stuff? So much stuff. There's so much evidence.
One of the things that was brought up was that the Browns or Mr. Brown covered things up with his job. What are they talking about? What specifically would he have covered up, if you can speak on that, or like how would he have done that?
I don't know if there's anything in particular as much as just they're saying because of his job that he would be
in the position to be able to do that,
or to tell if he saw abuse going on, but he didn't, right? So naturally he'd be the one covering up.
So it's just speculation?
There's lots of things that have been said through the past 2.5 years. I know one of the funniest things is hilarious, especially if you know my parents, it's hilarious. So I remember when this case started, they kept saying, oh, the Flore boot camp, the Flore boot camp. I was like, what does that even mean? And what they were saying was the Browns or other people from like our church, oh yeah, they send their kids over to the Flore boot camp and Tamal Flore is the ringleader. I'm like, what? Like, what does that mean? Like, I grew up in that house. Like, what do you think? We're doing like push-ups out in the yard, like staying up till midnight. And I'm like, I don't know what this is even supposed to mean. And so there's things like that. And so when you paint that narrative, then it's like, well, Joel, you were the CPS worker, you should have told. So that could be what they mean. I did want to backtrack, if I may, real quick. I want to bring clarity to what I said, just for all who are listening. And I really want to honor everyone who's listening. The court case that I mentioned originally from 2018. I just want to say I have love for everyone. And looking back, when I was brought in on that court case, that was I was young. I mean, shoot. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I was like, what, 20, 19? That was really difficult. And I just want to say that I don't have any hate or vendetta against people of the LGBTQ community. I have nothing but love. I just think as a former foster child, that for me personally, my story was to have a man and a wife was comforting. I'm a victim of sexual abuse, and so I can't even imagine. I had a huge fear of men. I don't now, so we're good. We're good right now, David. But I had a huge fear of men. Okay, and so I look back to when I was originally removed. That would have been like so horrific if I had been with two men, because I had such fear, right? And so to me, my personal opinion is a man and woman, because I think they have different jobs. But I say that to say it's not because I'm like, I don't like you. I have nothing but love, and anyone who knows me knows I stand by this. I'll give you a big hug. Let's go out for coffee, right? So I just wanted to say that real quick, but
I appreciate that. Where were we going with that? I don't remember. Yeah, somebody said how many? It's half. Seems like they're pushing agendas. Agreed, and an agenda against foster care and adoption. I wonder what agenda they would be pushing with foster care.
I mean, so I think what I've been seeing based off of what's been being posted the past few days is that Okay, here's one. So they said in the press, I really want to go down this route. They said in the press conference that both families, the Browns and the Flores, have been subsidized over $1 million.
Yeah.
Okay. And that happens if you're familiar with foster care, you get a subsidy per child, but every child's different. It's based off the trauma they've been through or what doctor has assessed them. Like, oh, they're like a level 3. They really need attention. We're going to give them more for this child, but less for this one. Okay. So, when you go through
I'm sorry, what is the process? Do you know what the process is for that? Can you just go
to
in
get
there? Do you just go in there and say like this child is a level 3, or do you have to have
so there's actual things you have to go through. So I remember when I was removed from my biological mother, that I remember I saw like a speech therapist, I saw a counselor, I think I saw just a regular doctor, like a physician, because they're assessing like, oh, okay, oh, does they have ADHD? Okay, she is, split personality, right? They're assessing, okay, she really struggles, she's screaming every time she is in dark. You know what I'm saying? They're assessing medications, blah, 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 blah. And there's probably more to that, and I'm not the most knowledgeable in that
right
arena, so don't quote me, but it's something like that. And so then what they do, they assign what the subsidy is, and it changes as you get older. It's going to lessen. And then I think it's when you hit 18 that it ceases. Okay. So let's go with this $1 million. Let's go $1 million. We can even say 2 million. Why not? So let's just say my family was given 2 million over the course, they said, of 20 years. I think they said 20 years, 2 million. Okay. So with 18 kids, my parents have documentation of, say, what they spent for groceries. I believe we roughly spent $3,000 a month on groceries. 20 people in total. Plus, we always had friends over in the summer.
That's more than I make in a month.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. I don't know how my parents did it. So you just do that, strictly groceries. That's almost $40,000 a year. Okay, and that doesn't include going out to eat. We went to the movie theaters, blah 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 blah. Okay, just $40,000. That's just food. Okay. And then you weed into that, especially as we started to get older, all the cars. I mean, cars aren't cheap, right? You're not getting free cars. They're anywhere from, $3 to $8 grand, right? Per car. My parents bought all of us our first car. After that, they were like, you're kind of on your own. Although my brother, they helped him get a couple cars.
How selfish of them.
Yeah, I know, right? Gosh. Cars, right? We had the best clothes. Oh my word, we were always dressed to the nines. Like my mom always made sure we were dressed nice. And great food, private tutors. Oh, private tutors are not cheap. I remember for the private school we were going to, I want to say it was $10,000 per person to attend. Yeah, that adds up. 10,000 per year. We were in private school numerous years. Okay, braces. I believe my mom did the numbers the other day. I think that was around $30,000-$40,000 cash for braces. Wasn't covered. So when you start to do the math, it adds up real quick to heat that house. We lived in a huge house. Vacations aren't cheap. We'd stay in a huge mansion to house us, and we'd go with friends in a huge, we stayed in one house. I believe it was 3-4 level Hilton Head Island. I'll just throw that out there because that's how great my parents were. Hilton Head Island, we'd be there for 7-10 days. Oh, that's not cheap. So, to throw out that my parents use this $1 million that the attorney general said for personal gain. Where's their personal gain? I hardly ever saw my parents buy stuff for themselves or personal gain. Even their dates were to be like, we went to Menards. Woo! That's a spicy day right there.
Why? I like those kind of dates.
Okay, now as an adult, I like Menards. But as a kid, I was like, that's weird, right? But that, again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier, how selfless my parents were. They went to Menards and then we went to to Applebee's. You know what I'm saying? It's not like they're going to get a $200 steak in Detroit. No way. So to say they're using it for their gain, show me the facts. If you're going to say something so bold as that, show me.
Somebody said, wouldn't the investigators have to have evidence to charge them? Is there some substance to some of the charges?
Ooh, I'm going to go down like a psychological counselor route because that's kind of what I'm studying right now. So I would say a good half of my siblings have been through awful trauma, sexual trauma, physical trauma, neglect, malnourished. And some of them we adopted a little bit older. I know we had a couple, I believe, adult adoption. So, right, you go your whole life in trauma and then you get adopted. That's confusing, right? And what happens is, and if you're familiar with trauma and how it works, is literally the front part of your brain, it gets fresh neural weight, like it's all reconstructed.
Mhm.
And so when you undergo trauma, and you understand this, having been through the system, sometimes you shut down, you forget, you can't even formulate sentences. 2 minutes ago you could, but all of a sudden something triggered you. You're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Or sometimes people have been through trauma, they're great storytellers. They like to
Mhm.
stir up chaos. Why? Well, when you are born in chaos and then you start to grow up and you're around chaos, it becomes comfortable, right? And then all of a sudden you find yourself in a comfortable situation. What do? Fight or flight. You freak out, right? That's why we often see people that go to toxic relationships, and they go to toxic relationship, yet they're saying, I'll never get with someone like my dad because he was a abuser. But what do? They end up with a toxic boyfriend and then another toxic boyfriend. And they can't break out of that cycle because that's so familiar to them, right? It takes healing. So with some of my siblings, I don't want to speak on behalf of all, because there are definitely siblings of mine that have had ample healing, and I love them so much. I love all my siblings, and I want the absolute best for each and every one of them. But some of my siblings, now studying trauma myself, I see didn't get that healing. Maybe they didn't want to get that healing. There was that fight or flight, especially if they're adopted older. Like, how can I trust this new mom and dad? No way, right? And so with that, stirring up the trauma, they love it. It's comfortable. I can think of a couple siblings that even long before this court case started, they were known for storytelling. They would go to, like, I remember I have a sibling and she went to my parents, like pastors and some of their close friends, and she said some stuff. And it was like weird, crazy stuff. And then they would go to my parents and they're like, what? Like, she said that? And then they're like, yeah, it seemed really crazy, but we just wanted to tell you she's telling people this. It's totally not true. But again, hurt people, they hurt people. Now, healed people, they heal people, right? But if you don't have that healing, that's all you know how to do. So, in regards to Katie, it looks like you asked that question.
No, it was
Oh, Storm.
yeah,
I
Storm.
see you, Storm. So yeah, I would say that some of my siblings have said some things out of trauma. They've said some things. Oh, this is another thing I was going to say too, and I don't know if you can test. So jump in, David.
Okay.
When you've been through trauma, although you seem very normal to me, so maybe you've gone healing, and you can like, because some people they don't know how to get their healing. But sometimes when you've been through trauma, the way you see reality is much different than the actual reality. For example, I remember when I was a kid, I hurt myself, and it was like very minor. But to me, I'm like, oh, this is awful. I need medication. I need to lay down. I need
Yeah.
an ice pack. Like, the world is ending. And my mom's like, you're fine. But because you've been through trauma, everything is amplified. Everything, it's like almost like sometimes it's like or reliving trauma, or something triggered what you'd gone through previously. It could be 10 years later, and you can still, that reality looks so daunting. And so I think, in addition to what I said about the trauma not being dealt with some of my siblings, I think some of them saw my parents, who they were strict. Why? Because there was 18 of us. Can you imagine if they weren't strict? Like, and the house would be a disaster. Thank God for my mom. She always had a rule. It was NOF, nothing on the floor, because it would have been a disaster. But she was strict. And so I think some of them are like, process that maybe as abuse. And I look back and I'm like, my parents had to be, it just would have been chaotic.
So, do you know what some of the things are saying? What was done that they had done that's considered abuse?
I'm not going to speak on behalf of my siblings, but I can say something that one of the reports say about me that I never said. They are saying that me personally, that I was beaten so bad by my parents that I had bruises from my neck down to my ankles, and I couldn't sit for 2 weeks. And my response is, one, where did you hear this? Because again, I've only had a 60, maybe 120-second interview with a CPS worker 2.5 years ago, and had nothing to do with asking me anything along those lines. But two, that never happened. My mom's my best friend. Like, and no, I want to clarify, that's not a trauma bond. I know what a trauma bond looks like. It's not a trauma. My mom is like literally like incredible. Like, she's been there when I'm weeping on the ground, and she's put me back up, and like, we can make it through. She's been there traveling with me around the country. Like, my mom is incredible. It's not a trauma bond. But with this story, one, it didn't happen, and two, It's just falsified details. But they're running with that. So I think that actually that story was told by a sibling. I'm like, that is broken. And I'm like, why are you telling a story about, it's not even about you, I'm like, this didn't happen. I would remember that. Trust me, it did not happen.
So they're taking something that was said by somebody else as fact and said that it was said by you.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, and that's a lot. That's happening a lot by a couple of people, I'll say.
Don't you think that they know that there's going to be holes poked in their story?
You would think. You'd think they'd just come and ask me straight up. But I think this goes back to my original first theory that there is much more that meets the eye, and that this case is going to help them in some way other than just we're helping poor abused kids. I really believe that, and I stand by that. And if not, then prove me otherwise. Whoever's watching that maybe is caught up in this, prove me otherwise. Interview some of me and my siblings that you're using our alleged stories that didn't happen.
So Katie said, sounds like your parents were trying to help you live your best life.
They were. I lived a great life, man. Such a good life. Like,
weren't you on like a show, like some sort of musical show?
Oh gosh, I've done so much through the years. Yeah, I've been there. I used to.
Was it like The Voice or something?
Oh yeah, a lot of people don't know that. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So I got to skip around. I didn't actually make it to like TV. And again, that was my mom. There's so many things through the years that I was like, I don't want to do this. My mom's like, this will be good for you. And that was one of those things that I was like, no, like, I don't want to do this. And my mom was like, just go for it. And yep, I got contacted to be on The Voice, skipped around. And what happened was I was so sick the day of the audition. I had a fever. Oh my gosh, my voice was gone. I sounded like, people kept saying like, oh, you sound kind of like Pink or Rihanna. I was like, no, I can't sing. I even flew in a musician from New York to help me, to accompany. Oh, I took it very seriously. And I get there and the producer, I don't know if he's still the producer. He's like, hey, I'm the one that asked you to come here. And I was like, I know exactly who you are. And I sang and he's like, I can tell you're sick. And he's like, I can't pass you through because I can't quite tell what your voice sounds like, but you can do it again. I didn't end up doing it because whatever. It was just a great opportunity. But yes, shout out to my mom for that one because I never would have done that without her support.
Wow, that's awesome. So Storm said, well, Katie said, with evidence, it can be hearsay to start a court case, especially when there's minors involved. And then Storm said, it may be the start of an investigation, not press charges. You would have to have ample evidence. I'm sorry, I can't see, so it's hard for me to read.
Yeah, I see, especially going through state courts.
Yeah.
And then Storm said, did all the kids live their best lives? Yeah, so we keep joking the past 2.5 years. In America, it's supposed to be you're innocent until proven guilty. But this just feels like we're guilty till proven innocent. And honestly, it's not even just us. There's so many people really that I've seen. Look, now that it's like when you're in the middle of a case, you start to see who else has a similar case around the nation, right?
Yeah.
And there's tons of stories through the years. And it's the same thing that people will feel like, man, I feel like I'm being treated like I'm guilty until proven innocent. And yeah, I don't know how else to explain it other than, when you paint a picture and you get the right media, it looks really bad.
I mean, I know you probably can't speak on the other family on their behalf.
I can a little bit.
Can you? Okay. So what are some of the things that are being said about them?
So it's all intertwined, remember? So the tagline that the Attorney General used is that the Browns and the Flores scheme together to adopt kids and abuse them. So it's all now they all have different varying charge. I mean, they all four of them, both couples, have some of the same charges, and then some of them have different. Like,
I've seen that everybody was charged with first-degree child abuse, correct? Which could be life in prison.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's scary.
Yes, it is. So, I think it's even scarier when you think about it, that people can play with people's lives like that. And again, going back to the falsification, these are lives, and that's I mean, I think it's a good thing that you like kind of I felt the room shift. Like, that is a scary thing to think my parents and my in-laws facing prison for life. And yeah, I just think, how could anyone do that to incredible parents? And for those of us who are just trying to get this word out, like I mentioned earlier, it's like getting traumatized all over again. It's like we're removed, put in a safe family, and now you're telling me like you're gonna take my parents away again. It's traumatic. Um, and yeah, I really hope that the people who are investigating really think about that, right? This is not it's not a light matter, right? It's not like you're grounded to your room. Like, this is serious. Um, and that's why we've really been pushing the more eyes on this as possible. And if there is some corruption, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone in particular because I don't know. If there are corrupt authorities, I really hope that you're caught, and not even for the sake of my parents. Who knows how many times this has happened to other people, right? I can't imagine, you know, y like, it's like, someone who wakes up and chooses to go murder someone. They didn't just wake up, like, normally there was something that led up to it. Normally, they started to decline, right? So with this case, it's like, I can't imagine that this is the first time this has happened to someone. And I would want, not just for my parents, but I want for future people to be handled in a justly way, in a kind way, because I can also say that it's not been so kind how they've treated. Like, I'll say this because I don't know how many people know this, but back in 2021, I want to say this was fall, it was fall time. And oh, I just like reliving trauma. So we had heard that my parents might be arrested and put in jail. And this was back when I was with my first husband. And I'm like gearing up for it, but we were about ready to leave the state. We're going to go to Arkansas. And my parents were like, just so you know, this might happen. And I'm like, okay. But I'm thinking in the back of my mind, it's not going to happen. Like, my parents are great. Like, why would they get arrested? And this was after the kids were removed. This is after the court case had been starting for a few months. So we're on the road. They call us. They're like, hey, we got wind. I don't know if it was from their attorney or someone, that we think we're going to get arrested today or tomorrow. Just be prepared. We're in a different state. You know how helpless I felt as a daughter. I'm like, I almost be like, let's turn around. But I'm like, we have to go. Like, this is already all paid for. And then we get a call the next day. I think it was from my husband's mom, Tammy Brown, that said like, hey, your parents were arrested. And just, I couldn't even enjoy my trip, but it was just so traumatic. And I'll say, and I can't point fingers again at anyone in particular, but even how they were treated in jail was awful. They were rude. How much they feed people in there. I don't know if anyone's been to jail that's listening to this, but it's tough in there. Like, short rations, they're rude. I'm just, and maybe I'm TMI, but I'm just being real right now. They didn't give my mom undergarments. Like, there were so many things that were wrong. They didn't explain how it works. So like, they didn't have money put on their accounts. I don't know. We've never had someone go to jail. We don't even know what to do.
How long were they in jail that time?
10 days. 10 days. And I remember one of their like court hearings or whatever was when they're in jail. And so they did it Zoom. And I remember I'm sitting there, and I just remember seeing them on the screen, and they're in an orange jumpsuit and they're handcuffed. And I'm like, what is happening? Right. And no kid should ever have to see that. And I'm just watching them, and I can already tell, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can tell through the camera they've lost weight. And yeah, it's just an awful thing that no one should ever have to experience. And yeah, I'm just thankful that they're out and bond right now. So
what do you think is going to come of this?
well, hopefully justice. I mean, there are some things in the works that I can't speak to, but there are definitely some things in the works that hopefully will be coming out and being dealt with in future days. Yeah, I mean, I guess moving forward, what's kind of next? It's like I said earlier, it's the waiting game. It's just kind of waiting from court hearing to court hearing. It's gathering evidence. It's working with people. It's gathering resources. It's people like you that are sharing the news and sharing this podcast and sharing interviews and really pushing the things that us kids are saying, because us kids are starting to speak out. I know some of the Brown kids will be speaking out as well. Some of them are scared to speak out, right? Because it's been a traumatic 2.5
Well,
years.
you had kind of mentioned some of the backlash you've experienced as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just the fact that they're under the scrutiny of law enforcement, under the media. It's the fact that people are attacking them as well, and you.
Oh yeah.
Correct.
Well, yeah, and it's like I almost can't even be angry because I've had a lot since Monday. A lot of angry people that have reached out and saying like, how could I, support my parents as an adult? Or they're like, these poor kids and these awful parents. And from an outsider looking in, I can understand, right? But also at the same time, it's like, check your facts, right? It's the media always, and I shouldn't say always, I'm sorry. The media can paint a picture that looks really daunting,
Well,
right?
Well, for one, clickbaity things sell.
Oh
And
yeah, we
then
know that.
and then on top of it, they're only reporting what they're being told,
Of
which
course.
is a problem. They don't have the time to look into all the facts.
Right. And so then when we're being told, don't talk to the press, don't, right? They're only getting one side.
Right.
Right. So I can't even blame the media. I really can't. So now that we are being open and the media is now presenting two, but everyone's been hearing the one side for 2.5 years, it's going to be hard to believe maybe what I'm saying or what my brothers are saying or sisters, because they're like, well, where have you been for 2.5 years? Well, we couldn't talk. And so my hope would be through this podcast and other interviews with reporters and news stations and hopefully on more Christian platforms and wherever platform, I don't even care where it goes, is I want the people to hear this, like our side of the story, because there's always two sides to the story. And the interesting thing that I would know is if you think about it, the police and the attorney general and the investigators or whoever is all involved in this, they've only really known, and I don't even say they known of my parents for 2.5 years. We've all known them for decades, and we grew up in that house. And not only do we know them so intimately, the claims are being made about us, and we're saying they're false, right? So there's a hole somewhere. Something's not right.
Now, you had mentioned before the podcast that you're putting together a petition. When do you think that will be?
I don't know. There's some pieces that I gotta work on. This is all new, but definitely stay on the lookout, because
is there anything that the general public can do to help?
Honestly, so if you follow me, I mean, we're getting a lot more traction on Instagram. I'm shamber.rain on Instagram. So if you follow me there and you share my main stuff that I've been putting on there, you share that, you use the hashtag justice for the Flores and Browns. And then you send it to people, but also if you have any connections, like I've had a couple people send it to reporters. I've had a couple people contact state reps and senators for me that they know personally. If you do, then contact them. You're amazing. Yeah, if you know people who have like a really big following on their website, or they're a new whatever, we got to get into those people's hands, because again, the world's been hearing from one side, and it's gonna take a community, a group of people to push this story forward. And the more traction we can get, the world will hear. I mean, I want this to go nationally. I want not, this is so much more than just the Browns and Flores. I don't want this ever to happen to anyone else again. But I also want the world to know we have a voice and we won't be silenced.
I love it. Shamber, I'm really sorry for everything you're going through. And I'm sorry for the trauma that this is, creating for all of you guys. If there's anything that we can do, please let us know.
Thank you so much for having me on here. And thank you for everyone that's been watching. I honor all of you so much. I value you. Remember, go follow me, shamber.rain, and get sharing.
Awesome. Thanks, Shamber. Thanks for doing this. And thanks everybody for watching.